Well, I promised I'd do it, and here I am to do it. I am here to review NWA Powerrr with 3 R's, mind you. I don't know what that's all about, but this is an interesting show that Scott Casey Gale, a good friend of mine, I guess we could say we're internet YouTube pals. He recommended that I watch the show. He said that he thinks that I would like it based off of, my love for a more old school feel. And, so I watched this show. So I was thinking about it, should I start at episode 1 and then, review 1 through 3. I said, you know what, let me, because I talked about in my SmackDown review about, being an alien from outer space and dropping down into the show and, not knowing what's going on. Would I know what's going on if there was great storytelling? Would I know what was going on the show? So I said, you know what? Let me start with the latest episode. Let me see where they've been at. Because, first episode, I guess it wouldn't be as fair to judge because I'm going to review that too. I'm going to watch it because this is another show that was very intriguing. I think that this is, not a great time in wrestling, but it's intriguing to see what they're going to do because there's a lot going on here, and this is a show that's pretty much available on the internet. At least it is, where I am. It's not on TV, but this is going to be interesting. So the NWA is trying to gain some traction. You've got Billy Corgan, putting up some of his money here. Once again, it didn't work out with Impact Wrestling, but Billy Corgan, this guy, you saw when he was a part of Impact that things are changing, that they, you really had a big creative shift during that time. That's when we were getting way better content from them. Mostly the Matt Hardy stuff, but a few other little things here and there. Billy Corgan is a guy that I think he has an idea of like what he wants, wrestling to be, sports entertainment to be. And I saw in this show there was a lot of different ideas being thrown around. That's a good thing. I think that's a positive thing. And the thing is, though, this show felt very experimental. So let's talk about this show and what I thought about it. And then, like, at the end, I guess we'll mold it all over and see, like, what I really thought about it. So we start off with Nick Aldis. He's, they do a recap of, Nick Aldis being interviewed. And he's, talking about how he's keeping his valet silent and he won't allow her to talk. And he doesn't want the interviewer to, question him anymore. And he wants to just keep it professional. So we start off the show. Now, one thing is for certain. When you see Nick Aldis there holding the belt, this is... You think of, old Seth Rollins holding the WWE Universal Championship. And you think back to Kofi Kingston holding the WWE Championship. Like, there's no contest here. Like, Nick Aldis, he looks like a champion. He's acting like a champion. The suit, everything. I'm not saying every champion has to come out there and do the whole Ric Flair thing. But, Nick Aldis didn't look like Ric Flair, but he had the Ric Flair vibe. He had this guy's a champion, this guy looks important, he looks like he's somebody. So I really liked, starting off the show saying, like, this is the kind of champion that we have on this show. We don't have, Seth Rollins, we don't have, these smaller guys are champion who look like they could be your next door neighbor. We don't have those guys on this show. But what we do have is really professional looking, like professional wrestlers. That's who we have. Like guys that look like they're there and they look movie star level. They look like a real television star. Back how it used to be. So, after we finish with the recap and everything, we go on to the actual show. And Eddie Kingston comes, and Jim Cornette is there, and he wants to talk. Like, I kind of didn't really get this. Like, if he wanted to talk, why did he need to, like, grab the headset? He could have just went, like, right into the ring, or whatever. Anyway, I've seen this done before. It's, but when Eddie Kingston was talking, I was listening. This is a guy right here where I feel like he's channeling Taz. The accent, everything, but this guy was really on. I mean, he was really direct. Now, you see how Eddie Kingston was talking here? This sounded like a real person. And then I'm just going to use another example, like Bailey, for example, how she was talking. She sounded way more, contrived. I mean, there's no comparison. Contrived, artificial, robotic. Same thing goes for, like, I'm thinking of Cody Rhodes on Dynamite. You compare that to what you heard right here. Like the first like actual portion of the show where you hear someone talking, besides the Nick Aldis recap. Eddie Kingston sounds like a guy out on the street. Sounds like a real person. Sounds like, he's trained and he knows what he's doing on the microphone. And he's laying out a challenge to the Dawsons. And, this guy, he sounded. He didn't sound like a wrestler. He sounded like a real person who was angry and energetic and full of rage and sounded like someone who wanted to get revenge. So, this I liked. I mean, this was like, he comes off hot and everything. He tells Cornette not to take his heat. This is, right here, like, this is how more people need to be. If this was, the acting of, like, wrestlers on Dynamite and WWE programming, I'd be all for it, because this is, like, this is how they should be. Why should they act like cartoon characters and act like robots and all this contrived, artificial, heavily scripted, overly scripted promos that they do? Even the slightest interactions between characters on the show always feel like they're, paint by numbers, like fed through a machine type of deal. Here, I didn't get that. Then we get our first match, and it's Marty Bell defeating Crystal Rose. And, right here, I was introduced, because I haven't seen a minute of Powerrr, of NWA Powerrr. Right away, I'm introduced to the new camera angles, and I really, I like what they were doing with the angles. I don't know if it would become annoying over time. The camera's very heavily zoomed in. You get a lot of shots, like, between the ropes and, like, deep in the corner. And I know what they're going for here. It looks, like a way different, like, less refined. But, I'm not really too sure if this is going to be good in the long run. Like, it doesn't look as professional as WWE, Raw, SmackDown, or AEW Dynamite. It doesn't look like it. This is definitely way better production quality than ROH, for example. It looks better. But maybe that's because that's what we're used to. It's just like, this is a very deep zoomed, like, they're in on the ring and they're in on the wrestlers. And that might be like to draw more attention to it. And also, it's to maybe get away from the fact that we have, like, a very small crowd here. Like, this is shot in a studio. And if you look, like, you have the old school, like, NWA set, but they're, like, standing in a, like, a designated spot for the interview. So that comes back. That's, like, something classic that you will see in old NWA interviews. Like, it looks very studio-like. And, I'm not sure if I really like that look, because, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, this is cool that it's old school and it, like, harkens back to those old times of the NWA. But I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, but why does Billy Corgan really want this style? Now, I get it. We're starting, from scratch here, kind of. This is the NWA. They've been downtrodden for quite some time. So it wouldn't be believable for them to, like, have this big fleshed out look. But I don't know. I'm just saying to myself, like, the whole TV studio look and, like, not being ashamed of it, which is another thing, like trying to pretend, so it's not so much that they're ashamed of it, because after the match, like, they zoom back out and you see, like, that the interview set is like just a few feet away from the ring, and you only have like one segment of the audience, and there's maybe only like 100 people there. You can hear every single thing that the crowd is saying. I mean, it's an even smaller crowd than Ring of Honor. I mean, it's all in the studio. And I'm just saying, in 2019, I'm not sure if I should be, like, excited about this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get maybe what Billy Corgan's going for here. We're so used to the big glitz and glam of the WWE, and now AEW with big time pyro, WrestleMania at the stadium and everything, and he kind of wants to bring it back to the wrestlers and keep the focus on them, and maybe, like, take away all the distractions and everything. But I'm not so sure that that is a good thing, and I'm being honest here. And you could say, oh, I'm spoiled and everything. I've heard this constantly. I've raised my standards too high. But I'm saying, but when you've seen, like, WrestleMania in the stadium, and you've seen, AEW's refined, cool look, and you see, like, SmackDown putting out that new great set that they've had. They haven't had a great set like that in quite some time. Why should I now, like, lower my standards and, like, feel excited that I'm now watching a wrestling event that's taped in the studio? Like, I don't know why I should, like, lower my standards and say, like, that this is okay, that this is acceptable. I don't really find that cool, but I'm trying to, like, look past that. So, them having the camera so heavily zoomed in on the match, it definitely, like, increased the sound level. So now, like, the moves, you hear everything, it sounds more impactful. So I guess that also adds to the overall presentation and the match. And, they did get some good angles there that you don't see in WWE or AEW or in anything else for that matter. But I'm just not so sure that I would want to keep watching this constantly in future episodes of Powerrr, because it's just, I don't know, it's so heavily zoomed in. I think, like, after a while, I want it, like, zoomed out, and, like, it's loud, like, every single time someone hits the mat. I know this sounds like nitpicking, and based off of all negative stuff I've said in the past, people are gonna get angry, and they're gonna say, oh, okay, you're just, nitpicking here, you're talking about the sound of the mat. No, but, like, after a while, like, I already kind of sense that. I'm like, man, they're so heavily zoomed in, and every single bang on the mat is, like, super audible. I'm like, I don't think that they need to do that. Anyway, as far as what did I think of these girls, though, Marty Bell looks like she is something. I don't know about Crystal Rose. I wasn't really getting as much of a vibe from her. But I like something here. We kicked off this match, and after watching something like AEW Dynamite, it was like a breath of fresh air not to see people moving 1,000 million miles an hour, and, just have, like, back to basics in a way, and things looking a bit more clean and more, like, refined, and like, giving me a chance to process what I'm seeing was kind of a plus. But, I don't know. I'm not, like, I'm just saying, after all the years and years of watching wrestling, I'm not going to get, like, super excited over seeing this. Anyway, we get the Dawsons, and, I immediately, like these guys. They came out, they said that they will accept the challenge from anybody but Eddie Kingston and Homicide. And, I thought it was a bit odd that, like, now I'm kind of thinking that Eddie Kingston comes out, but Homicide wasn't with him. So, like, I didn't even know that, like, Homicide was there. I didn't know because I haven't watched an episode of Powerrr. But anyway, we get the Dawsons. We're introduced to this new team, and, they look like a tandem. They look like a team that could do some damage. So that, like, I'm just going to say this. Like, I look at the Dawsons, and they already seem like better than any tag team in AEW or the WWE. And see, now that's saying something. And now I see, like, why Scott Casey Gale and some other people are talking about this. Because they do have quite a few good people on the roster. So keep in mind, I might be talking about their production values, but it has to be something that we have to call into question. If we're going to do an honest review here, we have to talk about that. And we have to honestly, like, analyze the way how the show looks and how it competes. And I know a lot of people are going to say you can't compare it this to this, you can't compare it to that. But I'm sorry, but we kind of have to. When this is out there, people are honestly going to compare it, because it's like when there's so many other options out there, like, are we really expected to watch them all, especially when there's, shows that, like, give us a bit more glitz and glam and, makes us feel like we're watching something special. But the thing is, like, here you get definitely more character here. Like, I'm turning on, Powerrr on YouTube, and I'm already getting more character than I was getting from Dynamite. Now on SmackDown, I got Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, but then I also got Shorty G, and I got Ali, and, like, a lot of, like, goofiness in the promos when, these guys come off as legitimate tough guys. Kingston, Aldis. And now the Dawsons, like, and I think of Dash Dawson over on SmackDown, and I'm laughing to myself because, like, this is a Dawson here. This is, like, a real tough guy wrestler. Then we get an interview segment. It's supposed to be Tim Storm, but instead we get Aaron Stevens, who, guys, you might not know it by the name, but this is Damien Sandow, and I was overjoyed to see Damien Sandow here. And he was dressed like I couldn't tell if he was supposed to be like a poet, but it turned out he was a pirate. He was there to promote a movie. It was funny, someone from the crowd yelled out that he looked like Captain Morgan, and then he put his foot up, on top of something, to emulate Captain Morgan on the rum bottle. So that was, that was entertaining. And right away, like, again, I need to say, like, I'm thinking of SmackDown, and I'm thinking of Shorty G, and I'm thinking of Ali talking about stinky breath. And then I'm listening to Aaron Stevens, a guy that sounds like a real pro on the mic. And once again, it's a plus. Now, the only thing about this is the content. He was advertising a fake movie. Tropical, what was it called? Tropical Pirates. And, like, I'm just saying to myself, he said that people are questioning him about his acting. Now, I get, like, that this is a story, but the thing is what I have to say here. Now, here's another criticism. This is funny, this is goofy, it's entertaining, it wasn't great or, even good. It was just, it felt like a fluff piece, and maybe they're going to carry this over into the next week and tell a little bit of story about, his acting and everything, and maybe someone is going to come out and, like, challenge him. But here's the thing, when you only have an hour to deal with here on this show, like, I don't know if, like, fluff pieces are really the right way to go here, because, I don't know. Like, first of all, they should just, everyone should be, like, launched into a program right away. We should be getting the very best within an hour. So, I know Billy Corgan's a very creative mind, and, if you guys listen to his music, I listened to his music a lot later in life than I really should have. I grew up with people talking about Smashing Pumpkins and what a creative, great, awesome band they were. And, and then I saw his work in Impact. And, this is a guy that has millions of ideas probably swarming around in his head. And, this is kind of him throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I don't know. I felt like if he was going to put something like this, on the show, there should have been more to it. It should have led to something. Because, like, at the end of the segment, I'm kind of, like, left, like, what did we get out of that? We got an entertaining, appearance from Stevens. We heard Stevens' mic skills. We saw him interact with the crowd. We got a piece of his character. We learned a little bit about who he is. But, every segment, when you have an hour to work with, and it's even less than that, is a 45-minute show overall. People are saying that is an hour. It's actually 45 minutes. You have not a lot of time to work with there. So time is of the essence on this show, and they need to do better with time management, and they need to make sure that everything is going somewhere. So we tune into the next show, because you might be saying, okay, well, it's 45 minutes. You're not losing a lot of time, but still, it's, 45 minutes. You could be watching another show on Netflix. You could be, doing something else with your time. So, like, you need to give me a little bit more here. Aaron Stevens is great. I know he deserved way more than what he got in WWE. That's an understatement, to say the least. But needless to say, I need to be seeing more. You're not giving me more of what I need to be seeing, to really make this show worth my time, make this part of my weekly viewing experience. We're talking about someone here who, needed to take a break from wrestling for quite a few months, and it wasn't the first time I had to do this, and I'm jumping back in here because this is an interesting time. It reinvigorated me a little bit, which is weird because it's like none of this content is really exceptional, so it's like, but you guys know how I am. You're kind of used to this on the channel if you've been subscribed to me for a long time. Anyway, we move on to the next segment. It's a match. It's Caleb Conley versus Dan Parker. I didn't really get a lot out of this. See, this is another thing. Now, Caleb, what I think first impressions of not really knowing who this guy is. Dan Parker was interacting with the crowd. Actually, the guy, well, I'm going to assume that guy is probably a jobber. I don't know. But he was interacting with the crowd. He was yelling back to the crowd, so he was getting into it. Now, Caleb, he doesn't look like a nobody. He doesn't look like a schlub. But then again, I'm watching this match, and it's an average serviceable match that Caleb wins. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm watching this, but I don't know these guys. I don't feel the need to go on YouTube and look up more Caleb Conley matches or Dan Parker matches, because nothing is making them stand out. And like I said, maybe I need to watch the other 2 episodes, but I don't think that I do. See, this is the thing. This is the problem. I mean, there's a very short runtime on this show. So we either need, we need to obviously have some matches, but if the proper storytelling is not there and you're like me and you're jumping into this and say, okay, well, so people are talking about this NWA Powerrr show, I need to jump in. So it's okay, I'm watching it and I'm okay, so this is a match that I've seen matches like this 1,000 times, that look similar to this one. But why am I going to watch this when they have other people on this show that they're not even showing? You know what I'm talking about? James Storm is on this show. Why is James Storm not having a match? Mr. Anderson is on this show. Why am I not watching a match from him? You have all these guys that are on the roster instead, but Caleb is not. You see what I'm trying to say? At least you look at James Storm. We'll talk about him in a little bit. And Mr. Anderson, he would have came out and did his whole shtick, and it would have been super over, and it would have added to that segment on the show. But instead, Caleb Conley, and like I'm just like, like it's just something that just comes up on the show, and why should I not like just move the YouTube timeline thing like a little bit further down, skip this over so I could get to the James Storm stuff and all that. Tim Storm finally gets his interview, and like I looked a little bit of information up about Tim Storm. This guy like started his career, it seems like a little bit later on, like in the mid 90s. He's about 54 years old. And this guy's not really like a big deal. He's mostly stayed loyal to like the independents. He's never been in WWE. He's never been in TNA. So like, how are you really gonna know who this guy is, really? You know what I'm saying? If you've never touched in WWE, he was never a part of like any other popular periods. So you're not. I don't know. Like the crowd seems to interact with him because he's been in the NWA for quite some time now, and he's kind of he's thinking about reassessing his career now that he's lost to Nick Aldis. And I don't know, I'm just saying, like, this guy is like an older guy and he's in shape and everything like that, but he's noticeably older, and I just can't have this connection with this guy that I have with obviously like Ric Flair or Hulk Hogan or The Undertaker, or Goldberg, or like one more aged stars, guys that are way past being over the hill. We have affection for these guys, but I don't know Tim Storm, and I'm not really given a lot of reason to really like him. I guess I'm kind of expected to know who he is, and hear like 100 people cheering for him, and I'm not enthralled. Like, Tim Storm just comes across as one of those old school NWA guys, and he does look tough. I mean, he definitely gives me a Harley Race vibe. I'm just saying, it's just like, once again, I need to ask the question, and I hate to group him, because he does look a little bit more, important than a Caleb Conley. But, why should I care about this guy? He's kind of really, I know people who have been a fan of the Indies and everything are probably going to take offense, but he's really a nobody. You know what I'm saying? Like, really, in the wrestling world, he's never been, like, on big-time TV. He's never been on Nitro, never been on a Raw, never been on an episode of Impact, never been on a big-time pay-per-view. And so Eli Drake is saying, he's kind of, I guess, a little bit down on himself that he lost. Eli Drake comes out, the whole mood changes. Like, you want to talk about a star, a guy where I'm kind of like just sitting like this and, in this very chair, watching my computer, watching Tim Storm. Eli Drake comes in and I'm like, whoa, like, hey, it's Eli Drake, and that's great. See, that's what someone should do to you. When they appear on your screen, they should really pull you in, and be like, you gotta be like, wow, now this is a guy that I need to be watching. Eli Drake comes in and this is a charismatic individual. This is a guy that, when I see him, I immediately take notice. And, like I said, it's like you get one of these, and then you come like this, because Eli Drake is, really drives home energy, like in almost every promo he does. And, because I don't review Impact, I haven't really had a lot of time to talk about this guy. But I started watching him when Scott Steiner started getting involved. I think it was like in 2018, and he started teaming with Eli Drake against LAX, and like I started to really like this guy a lot, and I was like, wow, now this is a guy you would have expected to see in, like, Ruthless Aggression or Attitude Era WWE. He's great, and I like him, and this is a guy that they need to be making him a constant on the show. So he said, you might not get the world title, but maybe we could tag team together and get the tag belts. So, he said that, Tim Storm says that he'll think about it, but like, I have to tell you, like, Eli was saying his name is on the list. I guess he was referring to champions, but something like, I hear like he's bringing up Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair and, Tim Storm. I'm just like, Eli Drake is putting this guy over better than, Tim Storm is putting over himself. But, that really just speaks volumes about the guy, like just how good Eli Drake is. But, this Tim Storm guy, like, you might have worn the NWA World title, but you're not one of those guys. I'm sorry, I'm saying, unless you were NWA World Champion in the 80s, I'm sorry, or like the really early 90s, no one is going to consider you to be a true great. I'm just saying. I know there's probably people who probably love Tim Storm. I've heard of Tim Storm. I never knew who he was up until this point, really like knew who he was. But I'll tell you something. I don't think he's on the level of a Ric Flair, and I don't need to watch 100 Tim Storm matches to get that. I could just tell right away from the promo. Then we get a weird commercial. It's for like this invisible hair cream, and this is probably building up to somebody. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, this, I get, this is like kind of like a more Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era-ish, like, promo vignette to draw you in. But this one was a real exceptional head scratcher. Like, there was nothing here. Like, there's been things that, were head scratchers, like the countdown for Jericho, GTV, lots of different things. But this one was just more odd. Now, I appreciate the oddness, but maybe a little too odd. Like, it was just bizarre. It just seems like something like Billy Corgan or whoever else, thought like, okay, well, let's just put something odd on there so people just have the reaction that I'm having to it. And I get that that's the point, but like, once again, I need to ask the question: if you have 45 minutes on this show, why are you doing stuff like this? Like, you need to get to the point. People, you know what I'm saying? Especially when it's a show like this that doesn't have big time, national TV exposure. It's, time is of the essence. You have to consider every fraction of a second to be important. And I don't feel that this show really had a sense of urgency when you're putting vignettes out like this that may be a little humorous, but they're nothing. Like, once again, it might be leading up to a wrestler or something like that, like a debut or some type of a reveal. But it was way too odd. It was way out, in left field, and it's just, I don't know, they need to be doing a bit more. Josephus was up next, and this guy is like, what a comparison here. I mean, we were looking at Eli Drake, and then we're looking at this guy, and this is like the NWA version of Kevin Owens. I mean, I got an extreme Kevin Owens vibe from this guy. Another, like, guy looking like he's picking up the paper, on his front doorstep kind of guy. Like, just an everyday Joe kind of look. So, he comes out, and Colt Cabana comes out doing this, and they're, like, trying to make fun of James Storm, and I didn't really get what was going on here. He, like, hands Colt Cabana a cowboy hat. He puts it on, but then Josephus throws powder into his eyes, and somehow Cornette knows that this is medicated foot powder. James Storm comes out. He super kicks Josephus, and then he's lining up to give one to Colt Cabana, but then Mr. Anderson comes out and bails out Colt. I don't know what was going on here. I don't know if something happened the previous week with Josephus and Colt Cabana, but I don't get that. Like, he puts on the hat, then he throws the powder at him. Then James Storm, we saw the previous week they did like a short recap and they showed that James Storm was chasing around Josephus. I saw like in the results that I think it was the first week, like the first episode, that they had like a match together, and I think James Storm beat him. But this is, this was kind of once again nonsensical on the show. First of all, you've got Mr. Anderson, and all he's doing is coming and bailing out this guy. You're showing me this guy that looks like Josephus, and he's getting the spotlight more than like Anderson was. Now, James Storm took in most of the spotlight, but like, this is who James Storm, this guy that looks like an enormous star. I'm looking at James Storm here, and like the fact that WWE couldn't do anything with this guy, it really speaks volumes. Like they couldn't give him an offer, is what I mean. Like, James Storm, like, I think he did like 1 or 2 NXT tapings, and then they couldn't like keep him interested. It showed that like WWE really has no idea what they're doing. Because I look at James Storm, I look at with him with that cowboy hat, with the beard, with the hair, and this guy, he's got the size, the physique. I mean, I'm saying like this, like Eli Drake, like Nick Aldis. I mean, these are like real big time stars. Like, the fact that like none of these guys like have ever been in WWE, or like, well, James Storm has technically been in NXT, but you can't really say that he was because they never signed him. It really is like shocking. It kind of shows that it is possible now to have big stars outside of the WWE that like they're like, these guys are responsible for getting themselves over. Like, and it really shows, like, it's very impressive. And it makes me want to keep an eye on NWA Powerrr, because this is like these guys' new home, and I want to see where it goes. But like, James Storm should not be hanging around with a guy that looks like Josephus. Like, you know what I mean? Not hanging, but I mean like hanging around with him on the card. Like sharing segments with him. It's just, James Storm should be in the program with all this. He should be in a program with Eli Drake, with and I guess he will be in a program with Anderson, which I'm fine with. Colt Cabana, I have mixed feelings about this guy. He is charismatic to a degree, but I've never been like a giant fan of him. I think he's probably one of the most overrated indie guys. I mean, it would be foolish to say he's talentless, but this guy is not on the level of some of the others. I'm just saying. Very goofy, weird segment. Anyway, we get Nick Aldis coming out this time for an interview, and the interviewer has promised to not ask any more questions, about his valet. And, somehow, some way, he gets around to, asking him about her again. Why doesn't he let her talk? And, he talked about, like, all these different, like, challengers. And someone said something from the crowd that wasn't really clear. He said, like, John C. I think it was supposed to be, like, a John Cena joke. I don't know, but I don't think he wanted to say John Cena. I think maybe the audience member said that. Anyway, this kind of felt like the price was right, with like just people shouting things out. You just had like this one panel of the audience. It kind of felt like that kind of, game show style, audience panel that they had there. But he was talking about different challengers for the belt, and he ran through the list, and it was a good segment. He says, if you want to try to get her to talk, he's once again talking about his valet, and she refuses to speak. And he says that, she'll speak when she's ready. And, and this is the part where I have to, I got to say this about this particular angle. I don't know why it's that important. Like, why as a viewer am I invested in wanting to hear this girl talk? Is she going to have anything important to say? Does she have some dirt on Nick Aldis? Like, I don't know. Like, why is it so important that this announcer questioned her? I don't get it. Like, why is it like a big deal? I'm just saying, like, to make this the big angle with all this, it's just, I don't know, it's disappointing to me. I would think that they would try to do a little bit more with him than, like, just the silent valet thing. It's just, there's nothing intriguing me about it, though. Like, why do I want to hear her talk? You see what I'm saying? Like, do you really want to, like, hear this girl talk? Do you, like, unless she's got these great promo skills and everything. But this was just, I don't know. It felt a little bit just on the lame side. I don't know. Like, again, like, I'll give Corgan credit, trying different things, at least trying to make a little bit of a story here, something, a little bit mysterious about all this. Like, he's hiding something, he has a dark side, whatever the case may be. But, I don't really know. Then they air another weird thing, and it's like, who is the Mark? And there's like all these different question marks, and I think it was related to that invisible hair cream commercial that they did. But like in this, they showed like the body of a wrestler, and they didn't show like who it was. It looked a little bit like Colt Cabana maybe, but I don't think it was him. This, again, I have to say, like, very weird. Like, bordering on, like, why, though? Like, why am I seeing this, like, really on my computer screen? Like, why are you showing me this? Like, I'm just gonna sit here and say, well, that was weird, but, like, not really having a lot else to really think about and process. Like, okay, whose body was that? Okay, but, like, you know what I mean? It's not like this really cool vignette where I'm like, wow, what was that? No, I'm just like, that was odd. It's just like watching some weird video on YouTube that, you kind of like look at it, and then after that, you're like, what did I watch? And you just go on to something else that makes more sense. Then in the main event, we had the Dawsons defeating Eli Drake and Tim Storm. It was an okay match for what it was. Nothing extremely amazing, but like I said, I prefer this style of wrestling to what we see on Dynamite with 1,000 different spots. It's more basic, it's more fundamental, it looks cleaner, it looks less sloppy. It's something that I enjoy watching a bit more. Like I said, I'm not opposed to, high spots and spot fest, but not when they're every single match. Then we get Eddie Kingston and Homicide running in, and they chase off the Dawsons, and that's the end of the show. And, okay, so what did I think of Powerrr? It was interesting, to say the least. Like I said, every match had this, like, big, not extreme close-up, but, like, they did more of a, just one step above a close-up in the ring. So, like, you were, like, kind of getting the ropes in every single shot besides when they went in. It wasn't like in WWE where they really, like, go inside the ring, but it's still, like, zoomed out to a point. So I think I still prefer that. And like I said, I think it gets a little bit annoying because when they zoom in like that, the sound is like picked up big time. Like it sounds like an explosion. And that kind of like adds to the impact of the moves. But I kind of see like why they don't do that on Impact. And why they don't do that on WWE programming. Because it gets to be a little grating after a while. And by the end of the last match, I kind of decided that even though this is a unique, camera style, it's not as good. And, I am sure that, playing around with, different camera angles, the camera crew in WWE and Impact probably, and on of Dynamite, of course, don't do that for a reason. It's because, it could be a little bit annoying to the viewer. Scott Casey Gale talked about the commentary. It's decent. A Cornette is good, but the commentary pales in comparison to what I'm hearing on Dynamite. I mean, I can't stress enough how good the commentary is on Dynamite. It's the show stealer for me. Hearing Shivani and JR is a dream team, and it lived up to expectations. And I've mentioned their commentary in all 4 reviews that I have done on Dynamite. So, this was okay, but, Cornette is no JR, and Cornette is no Tony Schiavone. But he did do a decent job, and the other guy, who's also doubled as the interviewer, did a decent job as well. But, it's, and it felt more free. And that's also what I'm going to say about this show. The show felt free. It felt like these wrestlers could really, do whatever they wanted. You could really tell with Aaron Stevens, Sandow, that, this guy walked out there, and even though his segment was complete fluff, it felt like Aaron Stevens had freedom to react and do things within his own bounds. The bounds weren't placed on him, but he set his own. And that is a style that if they allowed guys to do that on Dynamite or on WWE programming, they do it sometimes. They see on Impact, this is something though. I think it's mostly that's a Jeremy Borash and a Billy, and I think now that I've seen it now on Powerrr, it is a Billy Corgan thing, and Billy Corgan has a philosophy that works. And this is, if anything else, I like that loosey-goosey approach that he has to wrestling promos and segments. Keep them free, keep them fun, but they need to go somewhere, though. Billy, they need to, have a bit more purpose on the show. Whoever is, involved in the creative, and I'm sure you're having a big part to do with it, this show just had a bit too much randomness, and I'm saying okay, it was fun. It was fun to watch this and see what was coming up next. But the thing the invisible hair cream commercials and the who is the mark type of thing, and Aaron Stevens being out there to promote a fake movie, these are the kind of things that I'm looking at them and they just come off as hokey, silly, and kind of useless. They're not good, but I will say this. Billy Corgan has an eye for talent, because to sign Aldis, Mr. Anderson, Eli Drake, James Storm, these guys right here, those are main event quality stars. These are big time stars, and I'm a big fan of all those guys. I mean, those are viable world champions there. Those are guys where they're wearing a world title. And, I fully believe what I'm seeing there. Those guys are good. And, these are, there's a lot of talented people on here. Like I said, Eddie Kingston, the way how he was delivering that promo in the beginning of the show, good stuff. It felt like someone really angry. The Dawsons, they're a big, powerful tag team. And when, they're standing there or in the ring, I feel like those guys are a threat. And, and after watching, like I said, New Day and the Revival, and even the Viking Raiders, just the way how they presented the Dawsons, they came off as credible. So I will say this. Overall, what did I think? This show definitely, was grabbing me more than Dynamite and more than SmackDown. And, you know, the thing is, though, there were stories being told, like with Tim Storm and all this. You know, they're not strong stories. Like I said, Billy Corgan might, he might just be like kind of molding things over here. But I feel like with the really restricted time, placed on these shows with the 45 minutes, I definitely think that they really have to like rein it in and be like, okay, we need to have this show have a sense of urgency. And the fact that they didn't drag anything out was good. So if anything really wasn't that great, it didn't stay there for long, which made the show, I mean, it is 45 minutes after all. So it's not like, if they have a long match, I mean, that's the end of the show. But, like, there's no excuse not to have Mr. Anderson talk on this show. I'm sure he'll talk next week. But, come on, you need to be doing more. This it really wasn't enough. You saw who's on the show, you saw who's on the roster, but have more of a sense of urgency is all I'm saying. But it's an interesting show, and am I glad that I watched it? Yes, I'm glad that I watched it. I think that people are overrating it, of course, just like they do with anything. Look, guys, I get it. We want good wrestling. We want great characters. We want a show that brings us back to the Monday Night Wars, or at least to the Ruthless Aggression era, or even to the 80s. I get it. But, like, this is what I'm thinking about this show. It's something that's starting from scratch, so small, and people are already down on wrestling. SmackDown is losing viewers. Dynamite is losing viewers by the week. Like, we know that, like, you see, like, I even see it, like, people, when they talk about, like, the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era, or, like, the 80s, people get excited talking about it. They have, like, good memories, but they're just memories. And everyone that I ever talk to about it always say that it's not as good as it used to be. And, Billy Corgan could make that possible, but the thing is, he's starting from like a brand that people kind of view as like old. And that's why TNA or Impact Wrestling separated themselves not long after they were known as NWA TNA, because they wanted to separate from the NWA type of vibe. And he's starting with a really small studio based show that doesn't have national TV exposure. It's very far-fetched that anything will ever come of NWA and its power. And I know what everyone's always going to say. They're always going to say, well, you need to give it a chance. You never know what could happen in the future. You never know what could blow up. Things on the internet have blown up in the past, and they've ended up becoming big things. I'm just saying that I'm just being realistic about it. I am just trying to be a realist, as I always am on this channel. And I kind of know that this is probably going to produce some interesting things, some interesting conversations. But I damn well know that we are not going to get, a big time, power slot. Maybe they'll score something on the, on one of the networks, maybe on Access TV or something like that, somewhere down the line. But to think that this is going to be able to compete with an already oversaturated market. I mean, you've got Dynamite, you've got WWE, you've got WWE's NXT sub brand, all these different shows and all these different options. It's too many options, and it's at a time when not a lot of people even care about wrestling. This is definitely a period where people are kind of overblowing it and making like this is like such an amazing time, when really it's just a time when just a lot of new things are being released, and not everyone is really even putting in the best effort. This show, there definitely was tons of effort, and Billy Corgan is an underdog with this product. And I mean, this is certainly something to talk about. It's definitely something noteworthy. Don't get me wrong. But it's nothing mind-blowing. And, you know, this is like a show where you kind of have to take certain things into consideration. I understand that. But, you know, why should we really have the patience for something like this? You know what I mean? When there's already developed products out there, and I know a lot of people are going to say, but that's because, you know, everyone's already focusing on these products. They've, you know, spent their welcome and everything like that, and people need, but the thing is, realistically, people are not going to pay attention to the minor league stuff. And, you know, as disappointing as that is the truth. And that's like I said, that's what I do here. I speak realistically. I'm not going to fool myself or try to fool my subscribers by telling you this is an amazing show that you need to watch, and, you know, it's going to blow your mind, and we don't get anything like this anywhere else. And there are things on this show that you won't get on Dynamite and on Raw, and I mentioned what they are. But, you know, do I recommend that you watch this show? Like, you know, if you're down on wrestling, I can't really say that I do. There's big stars on here. There's things that were entertaining. But if you don't watch this, you're not really missing out on a lot. That's what it is. You know, like I said, I'm happy I watched. I gave it some time. You know, I got some entertainment out of it. But I don't feel like this is like a genuine must-see product. Or episode of this product. We'll see how the other episodes are. We'll review them here on this channel. We're gonna give it a chance. And guys, let me know if you've watched Powerrr. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell so you get all notifications when I post all my new videos. And guys, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.